At the start of the movie, we are introduced to the main character Dean. We see him surfing on a huge wave. His sister, Jan, appears beside him and overtakes him, causing him to wipe out. He sits on the beach for a few seconds contemplating how he can become a better surfer. In the next scene, Jan wakes up the sleeping Dean. They get off the bus because they've arrived at their destination. They walk forward in front of a bridge and see a warning sign. The sign warns them about the dangers ahead and that no one is allowed inside. Jan looks at Dean and questions him about his choice of location for their summer vacation. She asks him why he chose such a location when other places could be better. Dean explains that the person they are meeting, Uncle Woody, is a fun person. He also thinks that the sign is fake and is only there to keep out unwanted guests. Dean crosses the bridge and taunts his sister. Jan chases him across the bridge, and when they reach its end, the bridge collapses. The siblings see a souvenir shop nearby and go inside it. However, it gives off a creepy vibe, and nobody is there. Dean plays a prank on his sister by scaring her with a tiki mask. After Dean puts the mask back on the shelf, it comes to life. The mask quite sneaks out of the store and runs to an unknown destination. In the next scene, we are taken to a water park called Surf City. An announcement describes the attractions offered in the park. We see people enjoying the different services that simulate the experience of being on a beach. The announcement also introduces the owner of Surf City, Francis B. Butterfield, III. We then see Mr. Butterfield's assistant, Hodad, giving him a financial report. He tells the assistant that he's bored and his customers are bored. He asks Hodad what's different about all the 43 establishments he built. Hodad tries to give an answer, but Mr. Butterfield tells him that he's not getting the point. The boss elaborates that what he and his customer need is a different experience. Then he asks Hodad to go and find something different or noteworthy. Hodad tries to argue against sending him on a journey, but Butterfield throws his pencil at the map on the wall. He then sends Hodad to the place where it lands, which happens to be Iki Iki Island. The scene goes back to Iki Iki Island. We see Dean and Jan outside of the souvenir store, waiting for their uncle. Jan reminds her brother that they've been waiting for hours. A few seconds later, a vehicle goes past them. The vehicle comes back, and they are greeted by their uncle, Woody. He tells them that he thought they were coming the next day. Woody drives Dean and Jan around, showing them the different unimpressive locations on the island. Jan can't help but make a negative comment about what she sees. Suddenly, two cars drive past them, with one driver letting out a howl. Dean asks who those people are, and Woody tells him they are just locals who like to drive once in a while. Woody and the kids arrive at his home, a shack. Jan is unimpressed, but Dean becomes excited. Woody shows the kids several areas of his home. After that, Dean looks at the nearby beach and asks his uncle to give him a few pointers for surfing. Woody tells the kids that the beach is dangerous and that they're not allowed to surf there. He tells them he'll take them to another beach on the other side of the island tomorrow. Then he invites them to eat some burrito in the meantime. Later that night, Woody sneaks out of his home while the kids are sleeping. Dean wakes up and nudges January. He tells her that their uncle snuck out, and they decide to go out too. They eventually find themselves near the beach and see someone riding the waves. Dean and Jan decide to look for Woody to ask him about the waves. However, upon setting foot on the beach, they see a werewolf eating a sandwich. The siblings scream, startling the werewolf, and they start running away. While running away, a musical sequence begins, and monsters start appearing in front of the kids. Throughout the song, Jan and Dean encounter a red monster, a zombie, a water nymph, and many more. The song tells the kids about Monster Beach and what they can expect to see in that place. However, by the time the song ends, the kids are no longer in the area. They return to Woody's home after getting freaked out. That night Woody approaches Jan and Dean and reassures them no one is going to be eaten on the island. Woody explains the situation while giving the kids some hot cocoa. He tells them that the monsters on the island are friendly once they get to know them. Jan exclaims that she would rather have a normal vacation with normal people somewhere else. Woody tells the kid the story of how he came to own Monster Beach. We see a flashback of what happened. When Woody arrived at the island, he met its ruler, King Aina Haina. He taught the king how to surf, and the king taught him how to harness his subconscious self. He talks about the king's son, Nutamutta. Nut was a selfish person only interested in inheriting the island. King Aina sent Nut away to study and become responsible. However, Nut came back to the island as a lawyer and sued his father, but he still couldn't get the island. During the king's final days, he gave the island to Woody. Nut once again came back to the island. He tried to cast a curse on Woody, but ended up cursing the entire island itself, turning people into monsters. Only Woody was not affected since he wore the necklace, which doubles as the tiki deed to the beach. That deed protected him from Nut's magic. Back to the present, Dean asks Woody where Nut is. Woody reveals that Nut chose to exile himself. The next scene takes place at the mouth of the island's volcano. We see Nut as a tiki monster. He's using the heads of the smaller tiki monsters as drums. Another tiki monster comes running towards Nut, crashing through the others like a bowling ball. It tells Nut that little people have arrived at the monster beach, referring to Jan and Dean. At first, he speculates that they must be Woody's friends. However, when he asks for further details from the tiki monster, he figures out that Jan and Dean are Woody's relatives. Nut then thinks of a plan to trick the kids into turning against Woody. He thinks doing so would give him a chance at lifting the curse and taking over the island. Nut then starts singing a song addressed to his late father. He alternates between a calm melody and then suddenly shifts to an aggressive tone throughout the song. In the calm parts, he sings about making his father proud of him. In the loud and aggressive parts, he sings about the violent acts he wants to commit against his enemies. At the end of the song, he orders his minions to bring him the kids. The next morning we see one of the monsters, Lost Patrol, announce that Monster Beach is open. Woody, Dean, and Jan arrive with their surfboards. They go into the water and ride a large wave. Dean immediately wipes out and complains that he would be having more fun if he was a better surfer. Woody's friends appear one by one, and he starts introducing them to the kids. They meet a zombie named Widget, a red-skinned blonde man named Brain Freeze, and a water nymph named Amphibia. They also meet Lost Patrol and the werewolf named Mutt. After the introductions, Woody asks Mutt to teach Dean the monster-style surfing technique. Meanwhile, in another part of the island, we see the bruised Hodad. He stops for a moment, trying to see the positive side of such a scary place. Suddenly, a giant spider appears on his back. Hodad panics and runs around while stumbling across dangerous wildlife. Back at the beach, we see Jan attempting to ask Widget a question. However, she gets freaked out and runs away after the zombie removes her head to adjust something. Next, we see Dean struggling to stay atop a large wave. Brain Freeze gives him advice on how to unleash his inner monster. Dean fails to understand the instruction and loses his balance. Later that night, everyone convenes at a beach club. We see Dean and Jan talking to each other. The boy expresses how happy he is on the island. However, Jan has a different opinion. She hates Monster Beach. The siblings begin to argue and throw their drinks at each other. Fortunately, Mutt and Brain Freeze break up the fight before it turns physical. The siblings run in separate directions. Mutt and Brain Freeze try to cheer Dean up. The latter gives words of encouragement. He tells Dean that with more practice, he could unleash his inner monster. While the three of them are talking, Hodad pops out of a bush and gets startled by what he sees. Hodad calls his boss and tries to dissuade him from purchasing the island. However, he discovers that Butterfield has already arrived on the island and is standing behind him. The boss expresses excitement. He tells Hodad that the island filled with monsters is what he is looking for. Butterfield begins singing a song about how he'll reveal the secrets of the island to the world. The song lyrics describe his plan to tame the monsters and build a few establishments on the island. Butterfield also highlights in the song how he won't have the island too much to make a profit out of it. In the next scene, we see Brain Freeze trying to teach Dean the monster style. He tells the kid that the secret to such a technique is doing nothing. Unfortunately, when Dean tries doing nothing, he wipes out. In another part of the island, we see Hodad and Butterfield looking for a place to stay the night. Hodad approaches a trailer van and asks for assistance. The van turns into a monster named Tettles and asks Hodad to play a game with it. The monster plays the I Spy game, but the answer is always the same. Tettles drags Hodad along while repeating the same sentence, and Butterfield follows them. The next morning we see Woody, Jan, and Dean having breakfast along with the monsters. Jan complains about the food and asks what Mutt is eating. Mutt then asks the waitress, Madge, about the food. She then calls the attention of the chef, telling him that Mutt doesn't like his food. The chef, a large monster, approaches Mutt and intimidates him. The werewolf has no choice but to convince the chef that he and the others like the food. The chef then goes back to the kitchen. Woody tells Jan that one of the rules on the island is to not complain about the food. After that, she casually walks out of the restaurant. Near the door, we see Hodad and Butterfield having breakfast. Hodad complains about the eyeball in his tea. This results in him being thrown out of the establishment by the chef. Outside, Woody talks to Jan, asking her how she's feeling. He tells her about the time when she was young and hard to handle, similar to a monster. He then reminds Jan that the monsters on the island were also people at one point. Jan starts singing about her expected vacation and how different it turned out to be. She sings about all her negative experiences on the island and how she hates the place. She continues to enumerate everything she dislikes about the monsters on the island. By the end of the song, Jan breaks into tears. In the next scene, we see Hodad and Butterfield walking through the forest. A group of small tiki monsters spot them and mistake them for Jan and Dean. One of the monsters fires a poison dart at Hodad, causing him to fall unconscious. Back at Woody's place, Mutt gives Lost Patrol lubricant for his mechanical body. Jan walks in and sees the garage filled with car parts. She also spots a car hidden under a cover. Dean tells Mutt about Jan's love for cars. So the monster asks her if she wants to go for a ride. This puts a smile on Jan's face. The scene shifts to the volcano's mouth. We see Nut trying to finish a painting, but one of the models drops an item they are holding. Nut fumes and gets angry. Then suddenly, a different group of tiki monsters arrives, bringing with them Hodad and Butterfield. Nut thinks they are Woody's relatives. He asks Butterfield to introduce himself, but the businessman tricks Nut into making the first introduction. Butterfield compliments Nut regarding his lair. He then shows him a briefcase full of money, and offers to buy the Monster Beach. Upon seeing the money, Nut asks his servants to bring food to his guests. He then asks them what benefits he would get from selling the beach. Butterfield promises that Nut will become the chief of Surf City. This proposition excites Nut. When Butterfield brings out a contract, Nut hands it over to his legal team for review, but they hardly do any serious inspection. After the contract is signed, Butterfield asks Nut to hand over a deed to seal the deal. Since Nut doesn't have the deed with him, he and Butterfield agree to meet again in 7 days. After that, Hodad and Butterfield exit the volcano using a helicopter. Then, Nut turns his throne into a car and drives away. In the next scene, we see 2 cars racing against each other. One is driven by Mutt, with Jan as the passenger. The other is driven by Brain Freeze, with Dean and Lost Patrol as passengers. Mutt tells Jan to take the steering wheel. She hesitates at first but eventually agrees. Jan ends up winning the race. The cars stop on top of a cliff. Jan, Dean, and the others stare at a beautiful sunset. Jan finds the scenery to be an unexpected but pleasant surprise. Later that night, Nut and his servants try to figure out how to get the deed from Woody. The servants suggest violence, but Nut prefers to use magic instead. He brings along a tiki shaman and asks him to go into Woody's home to hypnotize Jan. The next morning, Dean and Jan watch Brain Freeze as he carves a piece of wood and turns it into an artistic surfboard. The siblings ask him to make surfboards for them as well. Fortunately, Brain Freeze had already prepared the boards. All that is left is to carve the design. The following scene shows Dean singing a song. The lyrics revolve around his dream of becoming a great surfer. The song also puts emphasis on Dean and his journey of learning the monster-style surfing technique. A few days later, we see Hodad in an office, watching as the construction of the theme park takes place at Monster Beach. While on a call with his boss, he tries to bring up a minor issue but decides to disregard it. Butterfield suddenly appears behind him. Hodad tries to celebrate with his boss, but Butterfield tells him that it's too early for celebration. Instead, he tells Hodad to join him to pick up the deed. Later that night, we see Woody and the monsters having fun around a campfire. Woody delivers a roundabout speech about his mortality. After that, Woody announces that he's giving ownership of the Monster Beach to Jan and Dean. He places the deed around Jan's neck, and welcomes her and Dean to the Monster Beach Beach Club. A few hours later, when everyone is asleep, the tiki shaman sneaks into the siblings' room. Jan sees it and gets immediately hypnotized. Jan stands up and mutters about bringing the deed to King Nut. She then walks all the way to the mouth of the volcano and brings the deed to Nut. He then orders Jan to return home. Hodad and Butterfield arrive and ask Nut to hand over the deed. After he hands it over, Butterfield asks him to leave the area since that's his office. Nut asks why a chief like him would need to move out. Butterfield then points out that Nut is a chief entertainer according to the contract. Nut gets angry and attempts to curse Butterfield, but Hodad takes his staff away. The next day, Lost Patrol gets out of his submarine to announce that Monster Beach is open. However, before he can speak, he sees that the beach is already full of people. We see the local restaurant is also filled with people. The waitress and the chef get overwhelmed by the new tourist arriving, asking for unreasonable requests. Next, we see Brain Freeze wake up. He immediately gets surrounded by people taking photos of him. He also sees a talking cutout of him that's advertising beach services. He gets angry at it and tears it apart. Brain Freeze also sees how crowded the beach has become. Woody and the kids look around and have no idea what's going on. They try to ask Amphibia, but she is just as clueless as them. Suddenly, Butterfield arrives in front of the group and introduces himself as their boss. He tells them that he's the new owner of Monster Beach and that the group is squatting on his property. Woody tries to argue that he's the real owner, but Butterfield shows him the deed sold to him by Nut. Woody gets confused and asks Jan how she lost the deed. The young girl reveals that she has been tricked. Nut appears behind the group, sulking on a bench and confirming Jan's explanation. Jan asks Butterfield if what he did was legal, and the man shows paperwork to prove it. Butterfield tells everyone that they owe him over $300,000 in rent. Woody admits that they don't have that kind of money. Brain Freeze adds that they don't even have a job. Butterfield takes the chance to employ every one of them. He gives Hodad instructions on what to do moving forward. In the next scene, we see Woody and the rest of the gang sulking in a swimming pool. Woody talks about how he never imagined his last day at the beach to be like that. Jan tells the group that it's too early to give up, and that they have to do something. Lost Patrol suggests stealing the deed is a justified course of action. Woody agrees that taking the deed would be the most practical solution. He then looks over to Nut and suggests they seek his help since he is capable of magic. Later that night, we see Nut and his servants break into Butterfield's office at the top of the volcano. He takes the staff encased in a glass and casts a spell. After that, his servants and the Tiki shaman perform a ritual. Nut also takes the opportunity to reclaim the office and turn it back to his old lair. After the ritual, we see Woody and the rest of the group at the side of Monster Beach. They sense a high tide coming, and see waves larger than the ones they usually see. Woody calls it the biggest high tide of the year. Brain Freeze brings out 2 custom surfboards and gives them to the kids. Woody reminds everyone what to do, and they put their plan into action. Amphibia pulls Jan and Dean far into the ocean until they reach Butterfield's yacht. They climb aboard and sneak past the sleeping Hodad. They enter Butterfield's bedroom, and Jan tries to take the deed while the man is asleep. However, the alarm goes off, and Butterfield wakes up. The siblings manage to run and get off the ship, but Butterfield and Hodad get on a helicopter to chase them. Jan and Dean find themselves riding a giant wave while trying to escape. Hodad swoops in using the helicopter and snags Jan, lifting her into the air. She passes the deed to Dean and tells him to figure out the monster-style technique as soon as possible. Dean closes his eyes and tries to remember what Brain Freeze told him. When he opens his eyes, his pupils are red, and he suddenly gains the ability to surf like a pro. Dean rides the giant wave and dodges obstacles with ease. However, he almost crashes into the side of a large building. Fortunately, Jan grabs his hand, and they both get carried by the helicopter. While in the air, Jan and Dean spot a water slide. They drop from the helicopter, and land on the water slide. Meanwhile, Hodad and Butterfield get pelted by coconuts fired from a cannon by Lost Patrol. Jan and Dean bounce off of the water slide and land on the road. They manage to hang onto Mutt's race car. Back in the volcano, Nut gets impatient and tells his servants that they're leaving. The skull of his father accidentally falls into the mouth of the volcano, triggering an eruption. Everyone on the island feels the earthquake and runs for their lives. The scene returns to Mutt driving while Dean and Jan are hanging onto his car. Woody comes in from behind and tries to save the kids. However, a random dog appears in the path. Mutt tries to avoid it, which results in him losing control of the car for a few seconds. Mutt crashes into Tettles and drags him along for the ride. At one point, Woody and the kids manage to orient themselves properly. However, Butterfield appears from above them and takes the deed from Dean's hand. Nut sees the helicopter and orders his servants to attach themselves to Butterfield, causing him to drop the deed. The deed doesn't last long in Nut's hands since Woody immediately takes it away from him. He then passes it to Dean, but Butterfield once again swoops in and takes Dean with him. Butterfield gets off the helicopter and uses a parachute. After that, the helicopter, along with Dean, crashes at the side of the volcano. We see Hodad and Dean hanging on to dear life while the deed is a few feet below them, stuck on a rock. Butterfield shows up and tries to negotiate with Hodad and Dean, but they end up falling into the volcano. Suddenly a gust of wind shoots up from the volcano, causing the deed to fly into Butterfield's hands. Woody and the rest of the gang try to run away from the volcano before it finishes erupting. They are shocked to see when the side of the volcano suddenly turns into the face of the late King Aina. Then out of nowhere, Dean comes out of the volcano surfing through the lava using an elongated boulder as a surfboard. Hodad is also with him. He rejoins the group, and his sister gives him a hug. Hodad sees Nut's scepter on the ground and picks it up. It turns him into a monster. Brain Freeze gives Hodad the name Stress Leave. After that, Butterfield falls into the water in front of the group. He struggles to stay afloat and asks the group to help him. The group tells him to give them the deed before saving him, and Butterfield complies. After that incident, Hodad started living as a monster on the island. Butterfield gets sued and ends up living in the trailer park. Dean and Jan enjoy the rest of their vacation at Monster Beach.